Have you seen this? A movie that feels like listening to the radio. Coming right up after 5 to 10 minutes of ads.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
This show would not be possible without the support of our patrons. If you would like to support our show, join us at patreon.com/haveyouseenthis. Patrons get the show a week early, and $5 supporters also get access to our Discord. Or you can tip us at our Ko-fi. Visit the link in the show notes.
That's my experience listening to FM. I don't know about you guys.
Honestly, I was expecting something more along the lines of FM, more like shit sandwich, but...
You can't print that.
Well, it's a podcast, so we can do
yeah.
whatever we want.
Yeah. Now, I'm not qualified to talk about FM. We should probably have someone guesting on the show who is.
Yeah, as it turns out, we are very excited to bring you a very special guest, a music critic, and bona fide cultural icon. So kick off your high-heeled sneakers. It's party time. We have got Hollywood Steve. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now, of course, I'm sure all of you will know Steve from the immortal web series Yacht Rock. Maybe you also saw him on the Yacht Rock documentary, currently running on Max, which I highly recommend. But he is also a longtime music critic. Is that not correct?
That is correct. I wrote extensively for the All Music Guide back in the day, and then I couldn't get paid to do it anymore, so I did other things for money.
Smart man. And in fact, I think
all?
I have seen your name on some of the reviews because I still do check All Music from time to time.
The ads make it difficult to, but yeah, I still go back there. And luckily we're still a source for Wikipedia, so my name is out there independently of allmusic.com.
Like I said, folks, bona fide cultural icon. And who better to talk about tonight's movie than Hollywood Steve? But before we start, I just want to give a quick apology to Tim.
Thank you
for making him watch this. It's one of those movies, folks, where we're going to do our best.
I'm glad we have a genuine music critic here because I am just like lost at sea watching this movie. I don't know where I am, what's going on. I mean, partly it is the plot of the movie, but mostly the music that is kind of the wallpaper on this this film is not my forte. So I'm going to lean heavily on Steve to help explain the context and significance of a lot of this.
Well, I think Steve can amply support us both because he is very knowledgeable, and he can help me out too, even though I am more versed in dinosaur rock and dad music than Tim, because for whatever reason I've always had the musical tastes of a dad. So,
Of an old man, yeah.
This movie does have its extremely mild pleasures for me, but it's still a little bit thin. But Steve, do you want to tell the nice folks what we're talking about tonight and what is kind of your capsule summary of the film?
Well, okay, the film FM was supposed to be sort of a rock extravaganza centered around this radio station and their quest to...
They're keeping it real, right?
They're trying to keep it real. They're trying to be the number one station in town without selling out.
The worst thing.
This is still back in the days before the internet, when selling out was still a thing that people worried about.
I would love to sell out
because they could still make a living at the arts without they could keep their art pure and free of commercial considerations, and somehow still have the resources to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in this case, their art is playing music on the radio, and it's
the noblest of professions. Yes,
not as lowly as the podcaster, but
there is actually a character in the movie who's real pretentious about his art too.
Yeah,
yes,
they were
indeed.
just like an outsized cultural force. They were just like the tastemakers, the shot callers. Like if you wanted people to listen to Foreigner, like these are the people who you'd go to. Like
absolutely. Yeah. And that's why so many artists from this time would write songs about how cool the radio was, so they could get played on the radio with their ode to radio.
I believe
Yeah,
that
and-
Steely Dan had a connection to this. In fact,
Yes, they did. They wrote and recorded the hit title theme, FM subtitle "No Static at All," an ode to how crisp and clear the sound was on FM radio compared to AM.
Every Zoomer is just like, hitting
Skip,
the
skip,
fast
yeah.
forward button right now. Like, I don't even know what these people are talking about. Like rotary dial phones. Like, what the fuck?
it's like wireless internet.
LAN parties. Like, what the fuck is that? But Steve makes a good point. This was from an era when one could sell out, i.e., take a hell of a lot of money for doing one's art. And I think it did grow out of the counterculture, mostly of the 60s, and there's like a whiff of the counterculture in this movie. But one of its failings is that it's like supposed radicalism is anything but. And we'll certainly get into that as we talk about the movie. But before we get deeper in, Steve, I was wondering if you could tell us what was happening in radio at the time. Like, what was AOR? Like, why is there no disco in this
Right,
universe?
yeah. What exactly were they rebelling against? Is a good question.
That's a terrific question.
Yeah, like they're playing the Eagles.
Because this is some of the most popular mainstream music of its time that just happens to not be disco.
Right.
What hit radio used to be on AM, and this was where you'd go for like top 40 radio, like earlier in the 70s. AM radio was known for like teen pop, bubblegum hits,
Disposable music,
it's
not like
the
now.
uncool music that critics didn't like.
Sugar, things of that nature.
Yes, which is a great song, by the
I
way.
love that song. Like, completely
It's so good.
unironically love Sugar, but
The arrangement in that is really, really good. Like, you can pick out all these different shifting elements, like coming in and out of the mix.
yeah.
It's really great. Go listen to it with headphones on, and you'll hear something new every time.
Homer Simpson's favorite song.
Just rolling a big doobie and listening to Sugar.
Which is something I would probably do, but you were saying, Steve.
Right. So FM radio became this sort of this new free form kind of a medium, and they would play stuff that wasn't necessarily singles. They would play album tracks from, as the album became more and more of a self-contained art form. You concentrate more on making a good album as opposed to like a good single, and then you'd fill up an album with filler tracks just to get an album out there to make people buy the hits that were already out.
I'm glad they don't do that anymore.
They certainly don't do that anymore. They eradicated that practice with Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
Anyway,
The music business, as it stands now, scrupulously ethical. Nothing like it was at the
absolutely,
time.
yes. They've gotten all the unsavory elements out, and it's basically just now people who love the art form and
It is about the
know
music.
it very well. It's totally about the music.
Yeah.
Thank
so,
God.
So they're doing more freeform, longer track sort of content on the FM band now.
Yeah, and that's how it comes to be known as AOR, one version of the AOR acronym, which stood for Album Oriented Rock.
Mhm.
Rockin'.
But here's the other thing. AOR doesn't only stand for Album Oriented Rock. And we don't call this stuff AOR anymore because now that it's older, we've kind of just transitioned into calling this stuff classic rock after the newer radio format that plays this stuff. So there's a crossover with my area of expertise, yacht rock, where in Japan especially, the name for yacht rock has been variously known as West Coast, all one word, no spaces, or in Japan especially, it's called AOR, standing for Adult Oriented Rock, which is kind of how it's a little mellower and more sophisticated, jazzier, more of an influence from black music.
It's
which is our definition of yacht rock and why the Eagles don't count as yacht rock. You listen to the Eagles, they're not influenced by black music pretty much at all. And it's very audible in their sound. So we don't call them yacht rock. But this adult-oriented rock genre is what most people seem to mean now when they say AOR, but they still get it's still sort of confusing as to which bands fall into this, because some people will think, oh, AOR, that's like Boston and Foreigner and REO Speedwagon, etc. And some people will think AOR, oh, that's the Michael McDonald era Doobie Brothers, but not the Tom Johnston era Doobie Brothers. Or that's Toto when they do soft rock, but not so much when they're doing the harder arena rock stuff. You know, there's enough overlap that it gets very, very confusing. But point being, album-oriented rock and adult-oriented rock, not really the same radio format, but the acronym is identical, so it gets used kind of interchangeably, and it confuses the shit out of everybody.
That is a really good clarification, and actually it clarifies some things about the movie for me, because, like I said, I'm more versed in this stuff. I was a weird teenager who obsessively read and reread 10-year-old and older copies of Cream magazine. So I have some idea, and like all the music I liked at the time was at least 20 to 30 years out of date. That's the kind of nerd I was. And watching this movie, I was confused as to why the character of Doc, played by Alex Karras, why it was such a death sentence for him to go to an AM radio station. And now I feel like I understand a little bit better, because, you know, obviously the FM station is where all the new hotness is happening, where they're actually doing
it's the hip
capital
station,
A
yeah.
art. Right.
Yes.
And I don't know, I guess on like on the AM stations, they're just playing like Bobby Goldsboro or something. I don't know. I'm clutching at straws.
I think it was implied that they were doing the kind of like old-fashioned country music that he said seemed to be his background music in that scene where he gets fired.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a quick little story from my hometown of Big Rapids, Michigan. So the local radio station there back when I was growing up was WBRN. The BR for Big Rapids and then the N for, I don't know, news. They did news sometimes. Maybe it was BR News. I don't know. Anyway, they had an FM and an AM station. The FM station was like dentist's office music during the day. So that's where you get your yacht rock, was during the day. And then at quitting time, which I believe was 6 p.m. sharp, it switched over to AOR in the sense of album-oriented rock, or basically it turned from dentist's office into like white trash rock and roll all night up until 2 a.m.
Right.
When the dentists really let their hair down.
Yes, exactly. The dentist kids. But the AM station, which actually was probably more appropriate to the area, the AM station was all country.
Ah.
And in recent years, they kind of updated it to make just the main station country as well, because that is kind of the majority of the market there. So you can imagine it was a great place for me to grow up, surrounded by well-wishers and
Right.
sympathetic.
Yeah, you really found your niche, yeah.
Yes, yes. But anyway, yeah, AM has always been kind of for older folks, like the less hip version. It's the less clear in the sonics. Yeah,
more static.
And I think there's all sorts of like business and licensing type reasons why it evolved that way into what it is now. But I don't remember what all of those are off the top of my head.
Right. Well, my headcanon going from the movie is that Doc did in fact go over to AM radio, and he became a pioneer of right-wing talk radio and became a millionaire by 1990.
Yeah, in the 90s, AM radio switched heavily from away from music and into talk radio.
Right. Check out our earlier episode about Oliver Stone's talk radio. But in the meantime, and this is one of the places where the movie kind of starts to fall apart for me. Because
one of them, yeah.
Right. There's this I don't know if they thought that they were making kind of a sort of wistful ensemble character study in like an Altman-esque vein or something like that. But
the characters didn't have any character to them. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, very little. And one thing that really rings false for me is that Doc is presented as a very good friend of the station's owner, played by Michael Brandon. Dugan, the radio station's owner, very regretfully has
Oh, he's
to.
just the manager.
Oh, that's right, that's right. Sorry, I'm confusing my bosses because
Did you not
bosses...
look at the org chart that I sent you, Jen?
I'm sorry, I haven't been in the Slack today.
All right.
But he's the hip boss.
Yeah.
Who walks around the station in bell bottoms and suspenders.
Yeah, just an atrocious outfit, by the way. Like,
Well,
the
it was
suspenders and the hat.
Tail end of the 70s. Nobody really looked good.
It's like a bad like LSD trip watching Yellow Submarine or something. Just like, oh man, you went out of the house looking like this. But yeah, 70s.
Right. And that's very important, the fact that Dugan is, in fact, the manager of the station, not the owner, because he's not one of the money men, man. Like, he just wants to, like, shepherd their little outfit, like, the right way. And, like, the money guys aren't, like, letting him do it.
He wants to keep it about the music, man.
Yeah, just let your freak flag fly, man.
Yeah, with the Doobie Brothers and REO Speedwagon, man.
Look, it's really important that we keep the Eagles' greatest hits on the all-time, like, top 100.
Yeah, we don't want such a niche act to be lost to time.
Yeah. Like, if people can't listen to Witchy Woman, like, why are we even fucking
What are we doing here? Yeah.
living? All I'm saying is that the dude was correct about the Eagles. But anyway.
Yes, agreed.
So Dugan has to regretfully fire his very good friend because, man, the ratings aren't there. And, like, we're going in a different direction. And, like, he doesn't really, he's not a hip, cool guy like the Martin Mull character who would definitely get Me Too'd in 2025. But, hey, man,
Probably,
it was
yeah.
70s. It was a different time. Now, the way that this scene of Doc getting fired is portrayed, he's like in, like, I assume his yard with a revolver,
Because
like
he-
shooting at bottles.
Because
Because he's a cowboy.
Right.
and it's the 70s, so he probably owns his own home on a DJ's salary
Yeah.
as well.
In Los Angeles.
In like Metro LA. Yeah. in Los Angeles.
Yeah, among the many, many, many differences from 1978 to now, like the economics are off the chain. But yeah, like I was saying, he's in his yard, despondently shooting at bottles. And again, I am looking at this from a very 2025 point of view. But it honestly looks like they're setting up a situation where Doc comes back to the studio with a gun. But
He's not a postal worker.
I remember those folks.
Yeah. Well, I
Now-
mean, really, it's just showing that, like, yeah, tastes have changed. Where it's like Buck Swope and Boogie Nights, like the cowboy thing, like isn't flying anymore. Like, wouldn't it be
Right.
awful if suddenly taste changed and the whole angle of your radio station had to adapt accordingly, or you would be fired? Wait, that wouldn't be completely ironic to the central like plot of this movie. Well, whatever, doesn't matter.
It really doesn't, because the way that this play, like on a rewatch of this, it hit me. It's like you guys have been hinting at. Like, the framing is that Doc is simply out of touch, and the reason he disappears from the movie isn't just like kind of bad screenwriting. It's that he just doesn't fit in with this like hip boho crew.
A shame too, because it's the actor, working again with Cleavon Little, who is in this movie at the beginning and at the end, and doesn't really have anything to do in the middle. But
kind of a waste of Cleavon Little, to be honest.
Absolutely, there are a lot of good people in this who don't have anything to do.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that the cast provides like a lot of the what little texture there is to the movie. Like, Martin Mull is particularly good just because he's given a little bit of room to do something with his character. They kind of forgot to flesh out everyone else in the story.
Yeah, there's barely any plot to this. It is a movie that, again, like just kind of putting the radio on and then you go and do something else. You can do, I think, the same thing with FM. Events seem to happen, but there doesn't really seem to be any kind of through line. Like we get the thing about them wanting to stick to their format because, the station manager is very protective of these, sensitive artist types who play music, play other people's art for a living. But the other thing that I really don't get about this is, because like we were saying earlier about the AOR, the adult oriented radio. I have never experienced that in my life. Like all I've known is top 40 radio. Like I would kill to hear like, deep cuts and B-sides and things that you don't normally just kind of have like, shoved through the airwaves. But the idea of the movie is like a backlash against that. Like I would love to hear more AOR stuff, but it seems like the movie is counter to that, unless I'm misunderstanding it.
Well, I a quick glance at Wikipedia last night clued me into this and why the music ends up the way it does. Irving Azoff, one of the most high profile and notoriously kind of asshole-ish music business managers of the 70s,
and that's a crowded field,
was originally an executive producer on this movie.
Oh. Well, now it makes sense.
And so he gets a lot of his own acts in there. That's how Steely Dan got the title song. He had just taken them on as clients because it was one of those music biz things where everybody's like, why aren't these guys bigger?
Mm-hmm.
And they thought, well, maybe if we get like a real shark of a manager on our side, maybe we'll be bigger. And so they hired Irving Azoff, and he was trying to get these reclusive nerds out into the music business to network a little bit more.
Oh, we need to try that.
I think there was a story about how he invited them to somebody's birthday party. I forget if it was the Eagles or Jimmy Buffett, but it didn't go well. But they did. He did get them the gig, I believe, doing the theme to FM. As we say in the Yacht Rock web series, starring Michael Brandon. And,
who?
Exactly. I looked at Michael Brandon's other credits, glanced over, like, wow, I've never heard of any of them.
Yeah, it's kind of the same mistake that John Carpenter made with Prince of Darkness, is that he cast a complete non-entity as the male lead.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, he just kind of looks good strutting around a radio station in bell-bottoms and suspenders. As good as one can look doing that.
Right, and in fact, I have to say that had I been the John A. Alonzo on this movie, the director, sole feature,
Good,
maybe best known for lensing fucking Chinatown, which is
okay.
He's a better DP than a director. If I were in that position, I would have said to Michael Brandon, like, look, I know that you're all playing like super hip long hairs in this movie, but I can barely see your face. Like, you're going to have to do something about either the hair or the beard.
I would have said...
But
pick
this is
one.
the 70s.
Yeah. This is on point. I would have said to Michael Brandon, or whatever his name is, I already forgot. I would have said, why don't you go get a coffee? We're going to have Martin fill in as the lead character, and then you can come back at the end for the big rally. Because I know who knows how to work a scene and play to the camera, and my dude, it is not you.
And that's kind of how the movie plays out.
Right, yeah.
In practice.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Like, we spend a hell of a lot of time with Martin Mull, which of course is welcome because, hey, we all love Martin Mull.
Yeah.
Check out our
Clue.
earlier episode on Serial from 1980. Another movie nobody really saw except our guest screenwriter Josh Olson.
Yeah.
He really is delightful, and Martin Mull provided one of the only times I laughed during this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's that extended, basically silent sequence where...
Of him having his emotional breakdown.
Well, when Dugan goes into the booth to talk him down.
Yeah.
And it ends with Dugan basically grabbing a couch cushion and being like, punch it, really get your feelings out. And, so Martin Mull starts punching and punching. And then he just suddenly grabs Dugan in a bear hug, and then his thumb instantly goes into his mouth. And I have to admit, that's very funny.
Yeah, he goes through like the 10 stages of grief or whatever, like within like a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And that might be like, and I know I'm kind of imposing some of the speculation that I did on Black Rain, that a lot of it, like they're shooting without a script, or maybe like with a really thin plot, and had to come up with some stuff like on the day of. And I want to believe that Martin Mull did a lot to like fill in that stuff, because the whole arc of that character, they're stealing the audio from a Linda Ronstadt concert, which, okay, like they missed like the beginning and the end of that little plot thread. Like it just kind of happens where it's like, hey, here's Linda Ronstadt performing half a song. But like he has some kind of stress to do with that, and it's never really explicated. And then like his wife leaves him for his manager, and he's broken up about that, but it just sort of like comes from out of nowhere. So I feel like they're like, we need Martin's character to have something happen to him. And I feel like the rest of that kind of got filled in as they were shooting, because a lot of it just doesn't hang together, and like one thing flows from one thing to the next. Either that, or I just is my inability to pay attention to this movie might have had something to do with it, because it does not hold my attention.
Well, that's the thing, because normally, Tim, I would take the opportunity to roast you here for your lack of attention, but on the other hand, I'm like, well, it's FM. Like, nobody's going to be watching this in a particularly rapt state, so why would you?
I didn't.
Right, yeah, no. I mean, you'd be better off like putting the album on, because the album was like had a much bigger impact than the movie
yes,
itself.
the album, in fact, sold very well. Is that not the case, Steve?
That is the case.
Because they had a lot of popular music on it. AOR Forever.
And to be honest, it does have some bangers. The title song is fucking great, but you know, anybody who knows me knows how much I love the Dan. So
yeah, and yeah, too. Like Steve, you mentioned looking up, Wikipedia info on this. Like you can compare the length of the Wikipedia entry on FM the movie and FM the song, and the song entry is like 4 times longer. They're like, oh, you see what they're doing with the intro here.
Because there's more going on in the song.
Absolutely.
It's much better developed.
Right, yeah.
It's Steely Dan.
Yeah, the song's actually about something. I mean, it's counter to the premise of the movie, which, sorry, but...
Yes, this is... And one of the things I love the most about Steely Dan is their incredibly sardonic lyrics, to the point where you think the movie is going to be a lot more cutting than it is.
No,
but
yeah. The movie's about as sharp as a piece of cheese.
I mean, maybe because largely the involvement of Irving Azoff, like, it just ends up being like, isn't commercial radio just fucking awesome?
Oh, and one other fun fact about the Irving Azoff thing, he took his name off of the movie because he wasn't allowed as much creative control as he had requested.
Well, they didn't want any creative input, I think, ultimately.
I think that's what it boiled down to.
Well, I mean, who knows? Like, maybe Azoff would have turned out to be some kind of like feature film savant, but it probably would have been ended up more like, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, or
yeah. Well, I mean, all the talent that they slipped into this. I mean, he could have made big names out of like Jimmy Buffett or Tom Petty. If only this movie had more creative input, those acts might have gone somewhere.
Oh, they're a bit too cutting edge, especially that Buffett fellow.
Right? Yeah.
We're gonna have to start a Yacht Rock jar to put next to the Mystery Science Theater jar, but I just have to say it: mellow, but not smooth. Kind of shitty.
Yep. Yep.
And that was the point where, and I've seen this movie like a couple or 3 times. I can watch it with a reasonable amount of attention, but when I reviewed it last night, I get to the Jimmy Buffett concert. I'm like, oh God, okay, fast forward. Skip right through this.
Yeah, for a movie where basically nothing happens for like the first 75 minutes, it is about an hour and 45, and that's mostly because there's like a Linda Ronstadt concert. There's a brief Tom Petty
Which
interview.
is the most interesting part of the movie for me, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, she's great. Like, I'm not, obviously I'm familiar with her mostly from her 70s hits because I grew up listening to Arrow 93 in LA. But she's really good. I did notice a member of her band who I think has since been canceled, but fortunately no one knows who he is, so it doesn't matter.
Could be any of them.
Well,
Well, I don't know.
hey man, it was a different time. No, like her guitar player, I think, got caught with child sexual abuse material.
Did he get it from a member of Led Zeppelin or borrowed a groupie maybe?
Hey man, all the groupies in the Sunset Strip were under 15. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, but hey, can't win them all. But Linda, of course, remains unimpeachable.
Yeah.
She's very good.
It was weird. I mean, again, they just sort of throw in another concert as a way to like move the story forward. But it was weird for me seeing that Jimmy Buffett concert because I had to take a moment to realize I don't think I've heard a Jimmy Buffett song. Like I don't even know what kind of music he does.
Shitty.
Oh, okay. Well, perfect for FM then.
Like, you haven't heard Margaritaville?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's as good as he gets.
Wow. Okay. No, so that one-hit wonder, Jimmy Buffett. Shame.
Or, there's the classic Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yeah, like I know the title, but I mean, I have no idea how that song goes.
You don't need to. It's dumb.
I like that Steve's not giving Jimmy Buffett an inch. Like, hey, should I learn more about Jimmy Buffett? Like, no.
No.
Yeah, this is like when
We've said much worse things about him on our podcast.
oh, I believe it. Like, I rewatched the Footloose episode of Yacht Rock today, and they didn't. Nobody in the Yacht Rock family held back on Jimmy Buffett.
Nope.
This is
That was the nice version.
yeah, Tim. This is like when we had Chris on the show to talk about Return of the Ghostbusters, and he just like went in on the director.
Right, yeah, because he
Like, I
knew
tried to
from-
give him an
from
out and
school.
be like, you don't have to like talk shit about the guy. He's like, oh no, like
He's like,
fuck that guy.
No, fuck that guy.
Like, I'm burning my bridges. So
Right.
it's
So I
just
guess-
that kind of a show.
We aren't going to have Jimmy Buffett on anytime soon.
Yeah, dead motherfucker. Fuck
Right.
him. Rest in piss, Jimmy Buffett.
I guess that's fine. Okay, so since he didn't perform Margaritaville, I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah, I didn't know that song at all. Like,
Yeah, neither did I. I mean, not that I'm an expert on his catalog.
Well,
it's not one of the
I
biggies.
did not
it's
know
the most
that song.
loathsome ones, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I knew the Linda Ronstadt songs. I knew Tumbling Dice, and she does Poor Poor Pitiful Me by Warren Zevon, which not many people know this, but that's a song that Tim wrote about all of his ex-girlfriends.
Yes. Oh, like he should have known better.
Tim, this joke would have landed so hard if you had ever listened to Warren Zevon.
I listened to that one song about the werewolf that he did. I think that really happened to him. That's why he had to write a song about it.
Hey man, it was a different time. The era was very freaky. You were always meeting werewolves with like really good hair.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the movie.
No. What is there to say?
Yeah. It's not like we can recount the plot. Basically, they do direct action to save their station, but it's kind of it's like the liberal version of protest.
Because see, the army wants to advertise on their station.
Yes.
And this is, just a few years after everybody got home from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to sell out in particular to the military industrial complex, man.
Right, yeah.
Dude.
And
Baby
the army
killers.
wants to buy all this ad time on their hip new radio station to really get in with the hip young people, right? So that's what they're fighting against.
Yeah, because
Right.
Q
And
Sky.
Jeff Dugan, the hip bearded guy, gets fired for not wanting to allow this advertising on his station.
And I can understand the Army's interest in wanting to buy ad time because Q Sky is through the course of the movie, they're like the number one FM station in LA, which is amazing given the amount of like gaffes and recording errors and dead air on the station.
It's
Like,
not a well-run station.
How are they not like the last place station in LA? They are so badly run.
It's their scrappy underdog nature. They're just keeping it real, man. People relate to that, man.
Could be. Yeah.
I guess they cut the scene where Dugan has to pay a huge FCC fine for the sex noises that went out over the radio.
Oh, that was Martin Mull. Martin Mull explained that he was just doing freeform art.
Yeah, see, it's good ass covering on that too. Also, too, we might be judging it by a different standard. I was not around for 70s radio, so I don't know. Maybe just like dead air was just a normal part of popular radio, because just as an aside, I had worked at LA Weekly for a while, and got to know some of the reporters there. Great reporters before, incidentally, they got bought out by a venture capital firm, and then everything went to shit. So I guess it's appropriate. But they're also one of them was pointing out like some of the writing that had been done in the 70s back when it's like, yeah, this is real like gonzo journalism, and it's really like edgy and just like on the on the real counterculture beat and everything. The thing, you look at the articles and you're like, this is garbage. Like, this is not good.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is very, very self-indulgent.
Yeah, sort of light of rose-colored glasses. So that might have been the just the attitude at the time of FM radio, where it's like, yeah, we're doing great art. Oh, fuck, I missed my shift. Oh, there's nothing going out right now. Whatever.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about, for example, Lester Bangs, whose writing I do enjoy, and probably was a formative influence on me, the whole Cream thing. But yeah, like to look back on it, a lot of it is fucking cringe. Like, it's really embarrassing.
Like, the music is just a jumping off point for whatever they want to write about themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Which is usually alcoholism, addiction, and sex crimes.
Yes.
Right.
Because that's what's cool.
Yeah. Perennially popular. Yeah.
It's just cool to like have sex in the booth, man. And quick side note about that actress, who is admittedly striking. This is a woman named Brenda Venus, I want to say.
Okay.
Of course she is.
Oh, is she the one who comes in there and like throws herself at Martin Mull?
Yeah, she comes in with the halter top and undoes.
Like
Oh yeah,
headshots or
she's
something?
the one with the pictures of herself, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, white nipples!"
Yeah, I do not know what the hell that means.
Yeah.
I listened to it several times to make sure I understood what they were saying, and as far as I can tell, they're saying white nipples.
Yeah, it's in the subtitles.
Is it like a tan line thing? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I would think that like the sexier thing would be her having no tan lines, because she hangs out in the nude a lot.
Right. Well, let me look up the Wikipedia for white nipples.
Check Urban Dictionary.
Yeah,
I'm sure it must mean something.
It's longer than the entry for Steely Dan's FM song. A lot of my own work tagged entries in here. That's weird.
Oh God, there are seed feeder illustrations. Oh no. Anyway, yeah. So this actress Brenda Venus.
Good name.
Again,
Her real name, I'm sure.
Yeah.
yeah. I have no idea, but she is of course a model, writer, actress, and it says here filmmaker. But one of the things that I found most notable about her was that there's a section in her Wikipedia entry headed "Relationship with Henry Miller."
Very
And,
interesting.
Yeah, and apparently she was his muse, and they exchanged a lot of letters and blah, blah, blah. But it says here, according to writer Ed Millis, Venus was a source of inspiration to the aging and ailing Miller. Brenda was all of 24 years of age. Henry was 84.
Different times, man.
Yeah.
I'm astonished she didn't, like, accidentally kill him just with some kind of, like, cardiac event. But, yeah, she practically does the same to Martin Mull in the movie, because that's just how things were in the workplace
Yeah,
back
he's just
then.
a swinging dude.
There was
The
no
ladies love
HR
him.
department at
I think the
Blue
HR
Sky.
department was one secretary that doesn't really get a character, although they all like hang out at her house at one point and have a very somber discussion about the future of the radio station. I do not know what this woman's business was. in the radio
Tim,
station.
why would you give any dimension or color to a female character? It simply isn't necessary.
In the 70s, yeah, no less. And she wasn't even a creative. So who cares, right? Just a suit.
Right. Well, she was one of the DJs, and at one point she interviews Tom Petty, I believe.
Oh, okay. The funny thing though is that there is like a seed of a genuine notion about principles in this movie about like we aren't changing the format because we want to make more money, which is weird because if they're the number one station, like they should be like Martin Mull's character with advertisers just like beating down the door. Like they should have their pick of advertisers, and really it's the admin who are doing a poor job being like, we want to play army ads on your station. Be like, this is not the right audience for it. Like you're not going to have a good return on your investment. What are you trying? Like there is some validity to it. The movie doesn't get that far into it or even make that case, but it is there.
Right, it just picks the worst possible scenario for the ads so that you're against them as a viewer.
Right. Yeah, like they could sell good, proper ads about, I don't know,
Northrop Grumman.
Right. Yeah. They could.
Raytheon.
You're right. Yeah. All the ones the kids love.
Yeah. Or like the new premium pet rock. The advanced formula Spanish fly. Whatever it is that the kids who listen to this would want.
Well, that leads me to ask a question about one character in the film. I guess the new hip approach to the Army is embodied by this character played by James Keach, and he is indeed Stacy's brother. He plays a Army lieutenant, Lieutenant Reach, who takes a meeting with Dugan and the wormy little suit that the owner of the station has sent to press the ads upon them. And he offers them some like absolutely cosmic government grade dank, which he then proceeds to smoke and laugh hysterically. Now, what is this character? What is the purpose of this character within the movie? Because I'm usually pretty good at figuring these things out, but I had no clue.
I feel like they were going for an Animal House vibe, but just didn't like know how an Animal House sort of ensemble thing works. Because you'd want to have like, a bunch of wacky, outrageous characters. Even there's like a tech guy who's kind of like uptight and nerdy, but it's like nothing really comes of him. I mean, he
gets a promotion.
Oh, good.
That's
yeah.
cool, I guess.
We've seen this done better in the masterwork Revenge of the Nerds.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And not a movie that's problematic at all.
No.
And honestly, we've also seen the sellout plot done a lot better and more coherently in Wayne's World.
Exactly. Yes. They refined the idea. It really took some years to mature. But yeah, it's kind of like a fairly standard plot, but even still, like they don't really manage to do anything with it. Where also, like if they just kind of adjusted some of the parameters, there really is no problem at all. Like just sell ads that are appropriate to the audience and kind of keep the firewall between like advertising and content, because clearly content is doing a good job if their station is so popular. There's almost no problem here, which is why there's almost no story here either.
I mean, and in the intervening decades, we've seen how it plays out when any kind of entertainment-based business loses advertising. Mm-hmm. It means that there's no more money to do anything.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, like how are they going to be able to retain that talent? Because again, like the Mother character, whatever her name is, not Mother from Sneakers. But
if only we had watched Sneakers instead. I'm sorry, Tim and Steve.
Dan Aykroyd as
himself.
DJ, yeah. But even she's like disillusioned for some reason. Like if this,
because there's a whole unearned moment where she quits her job later in the movie, and we don't know anything about her or her journey or her arc leading up to this point.
Right.
So there's virtually no dramatic impact when she has a life crisis on air.
Yeah. Like we get like a scene of her doing her job and then a scene of her doing like a DJ set at Tower Records. Like the annex on like the north side of Sunset where they keep all the like classical and world music, which I'd wandered into once when I was younger, and the woman, like the clerk there, was like, you are looking for the Tower Records across the street. Yes.
She could tell that you were looking for They Might Be Giant albums.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, not a big Brahms listener.
Well, your loss.
Yeah. I'm like, where's the soundtrack for 1978's FM?
My that reminds me of one of my all-time favorite experiences in a music store was when I was in the Tower Records that we used to have in my hometown, and there was this very excitable 12-year-old kid who came in and he asked like everybody at the counter, do you have any Weird Al?
I mean, that is what a lot of his fans sound like.
Right, yeah.
That's true. He's a treasure. But anyway,
He is.
Yeah, so Mother has like this unearned moment where it's like, I don't know, suddenly I don't want to be a DJ anymore. Being part of the #1 station and retaining some of my autonomy, minus having to play a different set of ads, which I don't really have any control over, has made me just lose faith in my career that I'm apparently tops at. So I don't get it.
yeah,
Doesn't make any
and there
sense.
is an allusion early on in the movie where when she first arrives for her shift, she takes a phone call and it's obviously some like mentally disturbed stalker, which, you know, is played for laughs. But that might have...
It was a different time.
Hey, like, you know, that just means he likes you. And
It'd be great to get that kind of engagement. Yeah.
yeah, and hey, maybe if they could have done like a Play Misty for me kind of thing, like that would have added some color. Or even, you know what, fuck it, like make comedic hay out of the fact that a woman in a public sphere gets stalked by weirdos. Like, I have a sick sense of humor, like I can take it, but they allude to it and then it's just kind of thrown away, and then 45 minutes later it's like, oh, Mother just quit, like she's sick of the business and blah blah blah.
All right, fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's just the way that people are written in this film. It's like they saw all those thoughtful movies of the 70s, because it does have that feel, superficially, of a 70s movie. But it's like they didn't understand what made so many of those movies classics.
Yeah, and
Because
Plus, they had to take time out in the middle of the movie for like a 10-minute segment about a Linda Ronstadt concert, which is just Linda Ronstadt playing her songs, which is great.
Yeah.
yes.
And it's the most engaging part of the movie. But I mean, even if you like, I just read through the Wikipedia plot summary last night while I was watching. They leave out like at least 45 minutes in the middle of the movie. They don't mention the Martin Mull stuff or the concert at all, and that's what takes up most of the time. So when they finally pick back up with the selling out storyline, it's like still the second paragraph of the plot summary on Wikipedia.
Oh man, they fell asleep just like Tim did.
right, yeah,
Yes,
they're like, oh
pretty
yeah,
much.
none of this stuff is important. Yeah, I'll just fast forward.
And the way the movie presents itself, it really, and like we all know, like this is a ploy to sell records. Like, we all know that. We're all grown-ups.
Wait, FM
But-
radio's about selling things?
But the ostensible point is that it's a statement about artistic integrity and you know, the cool people against the suits. I wanted to say like the freaks and weirdos against the suits, but nobody in this movie is really freaky. Like,
No.
there are no, like, maybe Martin Mull comes the closest, but it's the same guy who's like gunning for a job hosting a television game show. Like, he's not, you know, he's maybe about as freaky as Troy McClure, which a private kind of freaky. There really aren't any of the kind of weird people that you would expect from the music scene in the late 70s in
weird.
fucking Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's weird too because like they set up the conflict about it being like advertising, but they don't say anything about the content, which or maybe I wasn't paying attention because again,
we're just gonna put an asterisk next to all your contributions.
Yeah, but they don't really say anything about the content, which really it is the decline of content on FM radio that I think is the real tragedy that was worth fighting against, because even the big, collective action at the end where they're, using, like the fire hose to keep, the cops out of them, like going on strike so that they can maintain something. I feel like the thing that would have been useful for them to fight against was a sort of homogenization and change of content and format of FM radio. But that's just, it isn't, it's just sort of assumed that, I guess, the content of FM radio isn't going to change, or maybe they just don't see that change coming because, what we've been talking about, like the adult oriented rock that I guess was sort of the vanguard at the time of playing, longer songs and deeper cuts rather than playing like top 40 stuff, which is what it seems like the radio format has, metastasized into. That that stuff that used to be, progressive rock has itself sort of been sealed in amber. Because, I mean, case in point, I was setting up my Lego set at a train show the other weekend, and someone had on like the classic rock.
And they said, "Sir, you want the other train show across the street?"
No, believe me, we're all birds of a feather. But someone had on like a classic rock radio, and they're playing like the same like 10 songs that they're playing 20 years ago. Like,
yes.
So
right.
In that way, like the people who were doing this AOR, like trying to be like, hip and cutting edge, like that eventually just sort of ossified into its own dead format.
Yes, and you really get that ossification in the 90s when Bill Clinton signs off on deregulating the telecom industry.
Oh yeah,
and it's just kind of this large corporate takeover of radio where, there's all sorts of studies, and they develop their playlists according to like engagement. And,
it's the algorithm.
People only want to hear things they're familiar with already, so we just get this narrowing of the rock radio canon into something where there's like even most of the artists who get played, like they had way more songs that you could be playing, but you're only playing the same 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that's the thing that is always that I've always resented about just radio in general. It's just like, yeah, it's that song I like, but I'm like, I would love to be, exposed to a broader range of music. Like, play me something that isn't like, yeah, like you say, like the same 4 songs from this act. Like who knows what other songs, I don't know, the Eagles might have done that I'm not aware of.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like how
maybe not the Eagles, bad example.
Well, if you were to buy like a if I were looking for like a really good compilation of 80s music, and it's like, oh hey, it's like, so do you want to hear Mickey by Tony Basil and Whip It by Devo?
How about Video Killed the Radio Star? That's a banger.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, like, there's nothing wrong with those songs, but like, I know. But
there's more than 5 songs from the entirety of the 1980s.
Yeah, like in fact, nobody knows that Buggles album is pretty fucking good, because nobody knows any of the other tracks from it. They just know Video Killed the Radio Star.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Steve, that does make me want to ask, like, how do you rate the music generally in this movie? Like Jimmy Buffett aside, of course.
Of course, yeah. Right, we're talking about music.
Yeah,
right, so
just kind of the massive drag factor of whatever the hell Jimmy Buffett's doing.
What's interesting to me about hearing all that stuff like side by side is that they're not really differentiating between the softer stuff and the harder stuff like they do on a current classic rock radio playlist. Like if you're on classic rock radio now, it's got to be guitar centric.
Mm-hmm.
And they're willing to put in, and in this particular hip program director, Jeff Dugan, is perfectly okay with putting softer, smoother stuff like Steely Dan or Boz Scaggs or Linda Ronstadt or Billy Joel or even James Taylor. Like those artists are being played right alongside the Queen and REO Speedwagon and Boston, etc.
The real
And
heavy
so,
metal
like,
stuff,
it's
yeah.
not quite. Yeah, it's not quite obviously, yes, but it's not quite the like. It isn't being like it isn't being tailored by corporations to be sort of this masculine identity music.
Right.
Like it's not completely about like, listening to this radio helps me project how much I kick ass as a person.
You can crank that in your Trans Am. And you're cruising by the high
that's-
school.
That's all right, all
It was a
right, all
different
right.
time.
Yeah, right.
And that raises another thing that the movie evokes for me, which is, obviously it's the music, the popular music scene has changed so much. Like you mentioned, like the way that the songs would be more like guitar oriented, and I don't think guitars really figure into popular music today. I mean,
Well, that's
Not
why you
nearly as
need
much as they used to.
that's why you need classic rock to hold that torch.
right, and I feel like rock has in fact died. Long live rock, which is like fine. Like the culture moves on, and especially because like I think rap and hip hop basically won the culture war so far, and like dance music and synths and stuff like that. But it does make me think of the time, which is kind of embodied by a lot of my older friends who are into the exact kind of dad rock that I listen to, and which you see like traces of in the movie. But I think it's kind of embodied by like the kind of person who would have that one of those bumper stickers that says "Drum machines have no soul,"
Yes.
where it's like, you know what, like this is the real authentic music. Like it's not about like selling out. It's like really raw, and like they're writing their own songs and they're playing their own instruments, and this is
They're playing real instruments.
Right.
right. And personally, like I love synths, and I do also really love a extremely reviled band of the time in a lot of ways, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But
Yeah, you're alone on that.
like, shut up. Don't make me play the Beef song again.
Just put on Tarkus and I'll walk away.
I think Tim, like you evoked progressive rock. Like at the time, like that was a form of music which was considered like extremely silly and like
Absolutely.
not worth consideration.
Yeah, people who like reread Lord of the Rings were beating up progressive music fans. Like that's how silly it was.
Yeah, or they were forming Rush or whatever.
Yeah. You can only get away with that shit in Canada.
Shouts out Canada. We're so sorry about the current
Rush?
situation.
Oh.
No,
Hashtag not all Americans.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Thank
well,
you.
I would also like to personally.
We're not all like Jimmy Buffett.
I would also like to personally apologize to Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. In fact, that's how sorry I am. Just to derail my own point, like Jimmy Buffett kind of really does like embody the rot that you would see setting in, like in the culture of this movie, which is music as a product such that you are putting your names on like family restaurants and like really tall like cocktail glasses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Yacht Rock put it best, smooth and not mellow, kind of shitty.
Yeah.
We're all bringing it back around.
Yeah, and like in the in the episode when the female Jimmy Buffett fan says, "Oh, none of that heavy rock, only Jimmy Buffett music," and that's when you get like a Margaritaville franchise.
Yeah, the station you can listen to at the car in the office.
Yeah, and how American is that? Is just like pervasive cultural rot.
Grinding down anything that is like interesting to something, it just kind of becomes background noise.
Yeah, like kind of expanding your tentacles into other countries, like being really, really vehement about like defending freedom and protecting democracy, but like your culture is all like more hamburger. We want more hamburger. I don't know.
Or a cheeseburger in paradise.
Yeah. So, yeah, funny how that is. But yeah, anyway, we're so sorry, Canada. Sorry, but Steve, I think I had asked you a while back about the music of this film, and then we kind of went down a cul-de-sac. But
Oh, right.
We're asking about the format of the Steely Dan song FM.
That's a real good song.
Yeah.
It was one of their bigger hit singles too. It did pretty well on the charts for them. Almost made the top 20, which is
Not an easy...
better than a lot of their other singles did.
But yeah, some of the other music that was in this, because this is all like what kind of came to be defined as that AOR adult contemporary classic rock style.
Yeah, and it's I mean, aside from the whole like projection of masculinity thing, I think it's I mean, I don't have the sense that this music was at all outside the mainstream. Like these aren't like these characters are not like college radio DJs who are digging up the real deep cuts and bringing them out into the light. Where there's not. I don't get the sense that this was music you couldn't get anywhere else.
It could be like sort of a genesis of that, like, boomer-esque sort of philosophy where it's like the real good stuff, like the real true cultural signifiers are all mainstream. So anything that is like marginalized or that you have to work for to find, or that is niche to a particular community, it's like, I don't care about that shit. Like, give me the top 40 stuff.
That's a really good point. And I think it has a lot to do with basically the monoculture at the time, which of course is now completely shattered. There's no such thing.
Yes.
Like even television is not like the mass medium that it once was. And like, I don't think kids even really watch it. But also like kind of going back to what you were saying about like kind of like the male posturing of like a lot of rock music. And it's funny because this was the kind of thing that, the artists like Linda Ronstadt were kind of fighting against. It's like the effort to be taken seriously in like a really male dominated field.
And Linda Ronstadt was, at the time, probably the biggest female rock star since Janis Joplin. And, she's viewed kind of comfortably alongside all these other artists in this movie, to the point where there's a whole plot device that revolves around Q Sky stealing her concert. I did not understand how that plot mechanism was supposed to work.
No.
I didn't understand how they went about how it just seems like all of these things would have been, contracts signed and tied up in court.
Yes.
And it wouldn't have been possible for the scrappy underdog station to go steal this concert broadcast on their way to number one in the local market.
It's like a B plot from like a used cars movie or something. and on top of that too, like they're supposed to be like these scrappy underdogs, despite being the number one station. And yeah, their antagonists, like their rivals, are KLAX, who we never like see or hear anything from. So like they're supposed to be like, if they're like slobs versus snobs, or like, KLAX being like the preppy radio station or something. Like they never interfere with the goings on at Q Sky. They're just sort of this like vague, menacing notion. But
yeah, like there are these very kind of like half-assed like signifiers in the movie. Like, oh, we're supposed to root against the head of the other station because he's like kind of a dickhead who like rides in a limo with his like side chick. It's like, okay, well, I guess he's a bad guy. I mean, but he's exactly like Dugan. And in fact, the feeling that I get about Dugan is that he is absolutely a guy who would have turned into a Reagan voter in the 80s.
It's sort of the like Springfield versus Shelbyville rivalry, where it's like you're basically the same.
Yeah.
Once that ad money starts rolling in and Dugan starts living the high life, he's absolutely going to get that haircut, shave that beard off, get the aviator sunglasses on, do the whole Kenny Loggins transformation from this is it, into danger zone.
It's like, I got mine.
Yeah, he is going to get even more into cocaine.
I have been right my entire life and was rewarded for it.
Yeah, and let alone like cutting out Doc. Like he's not going to see any of his friends from the radio station
No.
anymore after he really starts making money. Like I just don't buy this guy as like the leader of this movement for like independence and artistic integrity.
And another thing, like, looking at the soundtrack listings, there are no black artists on this soundtrack. So there's kind of this implied split between rock radio and like pop radio doing disco. This was 1978. So disco, we'd be coming off like Saturday Night Fever becoming the biggest selling or the biggest selling album of all time at that point. And there is, there's Cleavon Little plays the nighttime to morning black DJ. He's got the real the stereotypical smooth lover man kind of radio voice, but he's playing all these white rock artists. He is not playing any kind of R&B whatsoever. There's no Quiet Storm on this radio station at all. The hipness factor here is very specifically white hipness.
Yeah, they've kind of carved out a sort of cultural, hegemony that they don't want to like give up, which ironically means that in order to like stay in their position, it means nothing ever really changes, which is, ultimately kind of a conservative philosophy, which I think
it's how classic rock radio ends up ossifying into this like white male identity music.
Yeah. Like, we don't want any new music. Like, we already have all the best music. Why would you ever listen to anything new or different? Or from a black musician?
What do you mean we don't have any black artists? We play Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
He plays guitar.
And it's funny that the conspicuous absence of black artists could yield like a whole other podcast episode, like a podcast series about the treatment of black artists by like the music industry.
Not us, we're too stupid. But
and
Well, you know what it reminds me of is the whole story behind Disco Demolition Night in 1979, where this Chicago radio DJ who was like very much a rock radio DJ.
yeah.
Went on this whole he hates disco, he doesn't want to play this stuff, and he sets up this whole promotion at the Chicago White Sox in between two games of a doubleheader, where everybody's just going to bring their disco records to the ballpark and set them on fire, and it turns into this whole riot. And there's articles that have come out in more recent years about like an usher who was at the game that night said that he didn't necessarily see people bringing in disco records as much as he just saw them bringing in like R&B records. Like people were bringing in Marvin Gaye stuff to set on fire.
Wow.
And it just turned into this whole reactionary,
How dare you change this perfect culture?
We need to resegregate radio.
Yeah.
Right. And a thing which repeated in the 80s with MTV. I think I recall David Bowie actually pointing out to an interviewer that MTV didn't really play a lot of black artists.
Yeah.
Yes, he absolutely did that.
Right. Yeah.
And it took Michael Jackson to kind of break that down, and then, but those first few years, MTV was kind of following along with radio in that, kind of in between Off the Wall and Thriller is those few years where disco, and by extension almost all black music, just got wiped off of pop and rock radio altogether.
Because even Herbie Hancock's Rocket, he is barely featured in the video. Like, he shows up like on a TV screen, but it's mostly these automatons that are the centerpiece of the video.
It's the robots supporting the record scratching.
Yeah. See, Jen, I did learn something from Pop-Up Video.
Hey, there is a lot to learn from Pop-Up Video.
Yeah. But like, that was a concern where it's like,
country.
We don't want to put like the black musician front and center in this video. Just have a bunch of robots instead. Otherwise, it's not going to get played on MTV.
Which is so wild because, like, in spite of like the reluctance of kind of the gatekeepers of the culture, like black music was so important culturally, and I mean, it was selling, and like a lot of people fucking like disco. And it's funny because the disco is like just completely not a factor in this movie.
At all. Like, it's not even
It's
mentioned.
an alternate universe where disco was
it would've
never
been-
invented.
Like at the time, it would have just been. I feel like it just would have been anathema. Like in fact, like one of my very best friends, who in fact the guy who introduced me to progressive rock all those years ago.
Well, that's no
he's
friend.
like, shut the fuck up.
You were saying.
I'm gonna tie you down and make you listen to Brain Salad Surgery for that.
Jeez, I'd rather have brain salad surgery.
Of course you would.
Yes, exactly.
So my friend who introduced me to progressive rock, like because he's older than me, and he grew up in the era, and he still has this reflexive like shudder when disco is brought up. And that's kind of what I was getting at in my meandering way earlier when I was talking about kind of like the very like male kind of like cock rock culture, where it's like, oh, we don't listen to that like that gay shit. Like, we're all about like rocking.
Yeah, partying and rocking and chicks who are underage. Guy stuff.
Everything.
Yeah, it was a different time.
Everything that reactionaries love. But
Yeah,
and
that is
I'm
weird.
mostly kidding, because like obviously I love rock music. I also fucking love disco.
There's a lot of good disco.
Yeah. And I mean, I can understand why people would have been sick of it by 1980 or so. I mean,
Well, there are a couple of paths to that. One being like, yeah, it is, it's kind of upsetting that idea of masculinity, because disco is more, I don't know, maybe more gay coded, maybe more
very
like,
queer.
yeah,
Very black,
queer.
very queer.
Yeah, so that like butts up against, no pun intended, the sort of traditional white masculine sort of profile established by this like classic rock. So yeah, I can understand people having a backlash against that. The other thing too, and because I get all of my history from Comedy Central, the drunk history about the that anti-disco night where they like blow up a bunch of albums on the in the infield. Bob Odenkirk,
Right, yeah, Disco Demolition Night.
Disco Demolition Night. We should probably link to in the show notes, but Bob Odenkirk has a great bit about why disco sucks. It's just like disco songs have about 6 words in them. We're just like, tonight, gonna be all right, girl, tonight. It's just like, yeah, just do that over and over again.
I don't know what is more emblematic of this movie's viewpoint than early in the movie when Dugan rushes to the station and he takes a call from a listener and she requests Freebird. Like, yeah, deep cut there.
I think that was the segment that's the sound is blocked out on the YouTube version because it contains Life in the Fast Lane, and the Eagles filed some takedown notice.
Yeah, that's their nest egg. That's their moneymaker.
Oh, yeah, and I would hate to take food out of Don Henley's mouth.
If you want to listen to that song in its true form, you have to get yourself a PlayStation 2 and play Guitar Hero.
True.
Because that is
properly licensed music. That's the way to go. But Steve, why? It's probably pretty obvious, but why do you think that this movie didn't hit with the public while the soundtrack did?
Because the movie's horribly underwritten and contains no relatable characters.
Yeah, no dramatic tension.
And also the lead, it's not good when the supporting character played by Martin Mull is a lot more charismatic and entertaining than the main character starring Michael Brandon. It's like all of these problems can be like identified in the script well before filming, and yet they weren't. But the movie is pretty much just wall-to-wall music. Like, the entire soundtrack is just contemporary hits. And it's the kind of thing that you could never, ever, ever do today because the licensing rights would just be astronomical. It would be your entire movie budget,
Right.
and then some.
Yeah, you'd have to hire
You know,
just
there's a
some
lot more
nobody as the lead. You wouldn't have any money left.
Yeah, you'd probably have to get like some random guy and just like, oh, here's the FM soundtrack. Oh yeah, it's starring Michael Brandon. Who? Oh, you know
The guy from FM.
Beardo.
Yeah.
You know. Plus, MTV didn't exist yet, so people weren't quite sure how to fuse a really good movie soundtrack with an underwritten film. That's going to take a few more years until Flashdance comes along to get that formula down.
Ooh, good point. But you don't see Jennifer Beals' body double dancing in this movie. That's a significant
That's
point
what this
in
movie needed, yeah.
Flashdance' favor. Yeah. Well, we barely talked about Martin Mull, as much as he kind of like looms large in the movie.
And by the way, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, he doesn't really look like Martin Mull yet.
That's true. He looks kind of like Thomas Lennon.
He's a very young Martin Mull here.
Yeah. In fact, he is surrounded by very strong actors. Tim mentioned Cleavon Little, of course. Mother, the older DJ, is played by Eileen Brennan, another very strong actress, doing the heroic work of trying to infuse her character with something.
Mm-hmm.
Anything?
Yeah.
Nothing's there.
You know, I have to admit, like the James Keach character, I don't really understand what they were trying to get at with that, but the guy is very funny. That was the other point in the movie where I laughed was when, and not even at James Keach, he comes in with this like silent like aide de camp or something, and the guy just stands there like the whole time, just like not moving, and he's got like sunglasses on. And there's a shot of Michael Brandon where he kind of like steps a little too close. The guy turns to him and like kind of like, reacts, and the guy is completely like as still as a corpse. And for some reason, like I popped for that. It was very funny, but the laughs are few and far between. I don't know. Did Tim? I know you were probably snoring for most of it. Steve, was there anything in the movie that you found like funny or apt at all, knowing what you do about the music scene?
I mean, I think I found it very difficult to pay attention to overall.
Absolutely.
Even some of the Martin Mull bits were like, I see what they're going for here, but
Yeah.
They're kind of just letting Martin do it almost all by himself, and there's only so much he has to play off of.
Right.
Also, I just looked this up. This was his feature film debut.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. So I guess he was like doing television before this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he'd also tried a music career before that. So he was kind of still just getting into acting and was still becoming the Martin Mull we all know and love.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I'm hard pressed to remember much of the comedy because I just didn't really laugh very much. Because, good comedy, it's not just jokes. It's also like setups and situations and, the all of the things that this script is bad at.
Right.
Yeah.
And I honestly, like, the first time I really perked up was when they're at the Linda Ronstadt concert and I hear them start playing Tumbling Dice.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, Linda Ronstadt's going to do Tumbling Dice. All right, here we go. I'm in for the next few minutes. Oh, they're going to do Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me too. Great. I get to experience Linda Ronstadt live in her prime.
Yeah. It's the movie kind of wakes up for a minute. Tim doesn't, but
yeah, when it gets away from the plot
Yes.
and just turns into a concert movie.
Right. And
that was their mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Can either of you think of movies that had this kind of like wall-to-wall bangers soundtrack that integrated the music a little bit better? Because while you were talking about it earlier, Steve, it did make me realize that the music is mainly wallpaper in this.
A lot of it, yeah. I mean, there was. I remember one sequence where it was soundtracked to REO Speedwagon's "Riding the Storm Out," and it was supposed to like give dramatic supposedly some dramatic things were happening at the station, and
Well, yeah.
I forget exactly what point in the quote unquote story this comes at, but it was clear that they were trying to use "Riding the Storm Out" to indicate that there was a storm going on at Q Sky Radio.
Yeah, and same thing too, because they take that brief moment to like ask Tom Petty like one question, and then they use breakdown as sort of the like, you know, overarching theme of the, you know, station manager having the conflict with like the admin, where it's like, you want to play just whatever ads and not pay attention to what people actually want to listen to. So it's like, oh, because the station is having a kind of breakdown of sorts. I get it.
Yes, very subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and give it to me.
Right. So it seems like they're even leaving like the story beats to the music. It's like just have the soundtrack carry the whole thing.
Yeah. And I feel that I don't know if you would agree, Steve, but I think that we've kind of passed the peak of movie soundtracks. I really feel like, and I know,
definitely.
Like I did not originate this opinion. I'm stealing it from someone who wrote about it. But you know, the case has been made that the peak of movie soundtracks was in the 90s.
I'll go to bat for that. I mean, you know, The Crow, Boogie Nights, Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, all those.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
Speaking of classic rock.
Yeah.
So I guess those would kind of be movies that kind of more were better at integrating the music kind of into the fabric of the story. I guess the problem with this one is that it's literally just a vehicle to like move records. Like everything else about it is incidental.
I can't believe you're so jaded.
Pretty much.
And yeah, I know, Tim. I know I'm not usually this cynical, but
I mean, I guess that's kind of what happens when your initial executive producer is Irving Azoff.
In a way, was the movie successful? It moved a lot of albums.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure Azoff made his money back.
Yeah, it was. I think the album was like a top 5 charting hit.
Yeah.
If I recall.
So maybe we're judging it by the wrong criteria.
Yeah, people were like, "Wow, tell me more about this." What do you call them? Foreigner.
What does the REO stand for in REO Speedwagon? That's what I want to know.
Oh, I used to know this answer.
God.
It's something to do with a local fire company, I believe.
Oh, okay. And whereas we know ELP stands for nothing.
It stands for L penis, Tim. Duh.
Oh, okay.
My best friend from my hometown, when she got really into REM in high school, her dad actually asked her, "Didn't there used to be REM Speedwagon?"
All right, I found your answer.
All right,
Here
yes.
it is straight from Wikipedia.
Thank you.
They named the band REO Speedwagon from the REO Speedwagon, a 1915 truck designed by Ransom Eli Olds.
Ah, it's the REO Ultimobile Speedwagon.
Yep.
Yeah, that's at least now I know.
Now you know the rest of the story.
It's very funny that like REO Speedwagon do appear in this film, but they don't really do anything except like sign autographs at Tower Records, and Michael Brandon has
another underdeveloped character.
Right.
Well, to be fair, like a few years later, like fan fiction on the internet would fill that void.
I've seen more engaging signings in a Spinal Tap scene than here, but
Now that is a movie where like the songs like absolutely are well integrated.
it's one of my favorite musicals. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think ultimately, like what really fails for me the most with FM is that we're expected to believe at the climax of the film that you can be friends with your boss. And
Absolutely not.
C-suite executives and company owners are ultimately benevolent.
Right, because the actual station owner shows up to save the day.
Yeah.
Right.
They had the LAPD on the ropes and then they like pulled back. They were winning and conceded.
You know, I would make another like hack joke about like, well, it was a different time about, you know, the LAPD in this movie, except like it wasn't a different time. Like the LAPD
No, it
has
wasn't.
always been exceptionally violent, and you can tell that this movie doesn't take place in real life because you can like attack the LAPD with admittedly non-lethal means and not just get fucking massacred.
Right.
Right. And there's a large crowd that they've managed to pull in the middle of the night because the radio station is so popular to protest this DJ's firing. And there's, I forget which character it is, but there's one of the business twerps there sees Dugan, up on the second floor, egging the crowd on. And he just starts yelling at the LAPD, "Shoot him! Shoot him!"
He had to ask twice. That's what's unrealistic.
And we're supposed to believe that the LAPD wouldn't immediately shoot him. I mean, they have a black man on the staff. They would have absolutely emptied their service revolvers into the building.
Look, a point-blank non-lethal round is still a non-lethal round. That's their justification.
And that is the point. You mentioned like the fire hose and everything, which is, I was like, okay, like we're getting some hijinks. It's like too little too late.
Yeah, it just
Like-
kind of comes from out of nowhere. There's like a brief scene, and then suddenly they're like out with the van, and they got like some food and some 2x4s to block the door, to barricade it, which it really is too little too late. Because, yeah, the first interesting thing happens 80 minutes into the movie.
Right.
Other than the Linda Ronstadt
Right,
concert.
yes. I mean, that it kind of exists on its own. Like, you don't need the rest of FM, the cruft of FM to have just like a Linda Ronstadt live concert.
Yeah, and like I was taken aback at where the climax occurs in this movie. It's like there's like 10 minutes left in the runtime.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, something's gonna happen finally, and then the movie's over. And the way that you could tell this movie is like total neo-lib bullshit is because like Dugan loses his nerve. Like he looks out at the crowd who are just savagely like lighting black cats and like pulling down cops' pants, and he's like, no, this is too far.
Throwing garbage.
This goes against the spirit of the Age of Aquarius, or what the fuck ever.
This isn't what rock is supposed to be about.
Yeah, rock is
It's
not.
not worth getting your heads cracked over a radio station, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
just go quietly into the night.
Yeah, and when you can just kind of like take a mulligan from the cops, and your boss, the owner of the station, will just say like, hey, you know what? You kids are right. You just go ahead and do your thing. Like, why protest violently? It simply isn't necessary.
Yeah.
Because the people running things will see how good you are, and then they'll let you do what you want.
If you merely
They'll let
cooperate.
you do what's right.
Yeah.
If this were a smarter movie, it would have made the point that the only reason the owner is letting them do quote unquote what they want is because they are in fact the number one station in LA.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not scrappy underdogs anymore.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, again, this is a station that plays the Eagles. It's not even fucking KCRW. I don't know, like, listeners, I think you could probably skip this one, unless you're, like, super into Jimmy Buffett.
We can skip the first 80 minutes unless you want to see, Linda Ronstadt.
I mean, that's what I would recommend. Just skip ahead to the Linda Ronstadt concert and watch that, and I don't know, maybe a Martin Mull bit or two.
Yeah, like the part where Martin Mull sees titties.
If
Like, that's that's pretty good.
But
We
but
don't
if you
get
really,
to see them, but
if you really want, quality outsider content, you should really be tuning into George Newman's Channel 62 UHF station.
Now that's a movie with politics that are on target.
It's a
And
better
in
run
fact-
channel, no less. So
Yes, and
Oh, absolutely.
in fact, we said as much in our episode on UHF. So
Yeah.
there you go.
So yeah, go into your local record store and ask for Weird Al.
Well, Steve, I don't know if there's anything else that I know Tim won't have anything that he was absolutely dying to say about this movie, but before I close out, was there anything that stuck out that you wanted to bring up about the film?
Sheesh.
You don't have to strain yourself. It's totally fine. Like, I know this one's a tough one.
There wasn't a ton that stood out to me, honestly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I will say this one thing. It did remind me of how we did the Yacht Rock web series, in that there's so much copyrighted music on it that the only way you can possibly ever watch this is for free on YouTube, because the clearances will never ever happen in our lifetimes.
Words to live by.
But it is on YouTube for free, so if you are curious, you can go watch the Linda Ronstadt concert.
Yay.
That's all you need, really. If the nice people would like to hear or see or read more from you, where should they go?
Goodness me. Let's see. So I am part of 2 podcasts, including the Yacht or Yacht podcast, where me and the other guys from the Yacht Rock web series will rate songs on a scale of 1 to 100 for yachtiness. And we get those song suggestions through our Patreon, which is a mere $2 a month. We also were kind of in transition with the other podcast. We had one called Beyond Yacht Rock, where we'd come up with a new genre every episode and count down the top 10 songs in it. That got to be a lot of work. So this past year and a half, we tried to do a different show called $1 Billion Record Club, where we only just talked about one album the whole way through. That turned out to be just as much work, because we had to figure out how to talk about the same artist for 45 minutes. So we're just planning a move back to the Beyond Yacht Rock format, which should happen fairly soon, if not by the time this airs. You can follow me on the Blue Sky at hollywoodsteve.bluesky.social. I'm on the Instagram, although I don't post a whole lot. It just seems to be like a place where you have to go if you want engagement these days.
Yeah, don't get me started.
I'm Hollywood_Steve on that one, because somebody already took Hollywood Steve by the time I got there.
Oh, you should do a podcast about tracking down the fake Hollywood Steve. And hey, I'm not saying commit any crimes, but true crime is very big in podcasting right now. So.
Oh yeah, that's what I've heard.
So just think about it. But jokes aside,
and if anyone's interested in reading any of my writing for All Music, there's no reliable way to search for it.
Great.
Just
internet.
Just find me on. Just Google my name, see if anything pops up, or
just
come across it by happenstance as a Wikipedia source.
Just type Yacht Rock into Grok AI or something, and just he'll hallucinate some articles that you wrote.
Yeah, boiling the oceans 1 gallon at a time.
Right, yeah.
That's the Grok promise. But seriously, Steve, thank you so much for appearing on the show. I know this was, like I said earlier, this was a tough one, but we really appreciate your expertise in kind of clarifying the culture of the time.
Well, I'm happy to have contributed whatever I can, and thank you for having me on the show. And keep an eye out for the book we're writing on Yacht Rock at some goddamn point in the future, because boy, we'd really like to finish that now that the HBO documentary's out.
I would read the fuck out of that. So
thank you very much.
I understand that it was a different time.
It was a different time. Things were just different back then, you know. Sexually aggressive women would just come down to radio stations and throw themselves at the DJs.
Yeah, it was a real problem. I mean, that's why you had like the backlash in the 80s. Like, it had to be stopped.
Too crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why you had movies like Fatal Attraction.
Mm-hmm. That's why I never went into radio. Couldn't deal with all the groupies.
Yeah, because you were basically living the life described in Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me.
Right, yeah.
And you were like, these young girls won't let me be.
Geez, Linda, I'm sorry. Let it go. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can show your support by going to patreon.com/haveyouseenthis and make a pledge at the $2 or $5 tier. $5 a month gets the latest episode before everyone else, plus access to our Discord, where we're always arguing about movies. If you'd like to give us a tip, our Ko-Fi link is in the show notes.
Let's kidnap a white dude.